Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of the Portuguese-American Hour dedicated to history. As always, we have our historian, Dr. Monique Kelly-Vallance, Ph.D. in Portuguese history from the University of California in Santa Barbara. Monique, how are you? And how was the success with the Portuguese kids?
Oh, I'm doing very well, thank you. And it was a great success. Definitely a very funny show. And I was like I say, I was kind of honored because that was the only show they did the whole weekend in California. So they weren't too
Wow.
thrilled with the fog, though.
I'm sure it was a little bit different, but hey, it wasn't as cold as Massachusetts, okay?
No, but yeah, I think Vanessa was expecting warm weather. I said, "Oh, honey, wait till next year when we go to LA." But yeah,
Yeah,
they were driving over the Altamont, and like they've never seen fog like that in their lives, so they were scared.
it's a different take here in the valley. But
Definitely,
congratulations, it looked like a packed house, and they're always a fun group. Yeah.
yeah.
And there's a few more. It seems like in the East Coast, there's a few more Portuguese ethnic, let's put it that way, Portuguese ethnic comedians, although they're kind
Hmm.
of course, pioneers. But
Right.
right now we see a few others, some in Portuguese, some in English, but a
Hmm.
few more doing a little bit because it's not a tradition in Portugal. Actually,
Right.
we don't have some
Oh,
very good stand-up comedians like we have
you're
here in the
right.
United States. Yeah,
Well, we have a couple more in California here too. They just have to get a little more well known. I mean, there's
sure.
Taylor Morant and
Yeah,
then Mike Rita.
yeah,
So
yeah. They do. They have to get. I believe the organizations have to give them a little more of a chance, to perform,
yeah,
so they get to be better known. Okay, let's talk about Portuguese history, which sometimes it's comedy, but in a different
yeah,
manner.
it can be. Sometimes it's soap opera. We never know what we're gonna have.
Yeah, tragic comedy. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. So, what are
Well,
we going to learn today?
well, and today we have a little bit of the soap opera aspect of it, and this is what I love about history because a lot of people when they learn about history, it's always like the dry facts. 1776 this happened, and for me, I get to study all of the dramatic things that happen, all the soap opera style things. So this week I thought we'd go really different. We're actually going to be in the 20th century, which for me is current events, but some people might still think it's history. Um, and I thought we'd talk about Maria Pia, the Saxe-Coburg Braganza. Now, this lady she claimed to be the daughter of Carlos I of Portugal, and she claimed to be his illegitimate daughter. And actually, she's almost the. I mean, we've talked about pretenders before, and that's what a pretender to the throne is, right? When somebody claims to be the heir to the throne or to be the king or the queen, and you don't usually see them in the 20th century. I mean, much easier to pretend to be Don Sebastian in the 16th century, but when you get to the 20th century, you have a lot more records, you have things like that. But she managed to kind of pull it off in a way, and it's really fascinating. So she was born in Portugal on April 15th, 1907. And what's interesting about her, so her mother was Brazilian, and they had moved from Brazil to Lisbon. And in fact, her grandparents were very wealthy, and they often sometimes use the title of baron, even though they were not themselves nobility. So we already kind of see this tradition of sort of like pretending to be royalty. And, I guess I can, let the viewers decide for themselves if they think that she was the real deal or not. Because what's interesting is it's kind of hard to tell. Now, one of the things that happened was she and her family moved to Spain. And what benefits her in a lot of ways is it can't be disproven with certainty that she was not the daughter of Carlos I, because a lot of the original records were destroyed during the Spanish Civil War. So, like her baptism, she was baptized in Madrid, and the original baptismal certificate did not survive. Now, she claimed that Carlos I was listed as her father on the baptismal certificate, which is highly unusual in a lot of ways. I mean, number one, up until recently, if you were an illegitimate child, your father was not listed on your baptismal record. So if you even I was looking, earlier, like in like the Azores, it's always, pi incognito, an
Yep.
unknown
Pi
father,
incognito or vo
right?
incognito. You see that
Yes.
all the time. Incognito.
Yep.
You
And I
know.
know, and my grandmother used to always say, act like everybody was a saint over there, but I went through the ones from Saint George, and there's a lot of pi incognito over
That's
there.
in Saint George only, not interstate. No, I'm just kidding. There is you if you go through older records, and I've looked through a few of them for family reasons and things like that, and you find a lot of that, a
Yeah,
pi incognito or
right.
or a vo, or sometimes it's the mom and the
Yes.
dad. But when it comes to the vo, it's mostly, of course, pi, but it has a few of them a vo
Yeah.
incognito.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's true. So, number one, she's illegitimate. The fact that the king himself would put his name on her baptismal certificate is also unusual, even if he really was the father, because he had whatchamacallit, he had a wife, you know, Princess Emily d'Orléans. He had two children already without marriage. And so normally, not to say that kings never had illegitimate children, but normally they didn't show up on the baptismal record,
They would
especially in the
be
20th century.
incognito for sure.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
Being
yes.
cognito for sure. He might leave her something in his will, or he might support her, but he wouldn't exactly go around waving the flag that he was the father. But a baptismal certificate was redone in the 30s. And what's interesting is that Don Antonio, and I can't pronounce his last name because it's very difficult for me to pronounce, but he was a member of the Spanish Parliament, and he was also a governor of the Bank of Spain. He claimed that he was present at the baptism, and that Don Carlos was indeed listed as the father on her baptismal certificate. So the bishop let it pass, and he actually allowed that to be added onto her baptismal certificate. So she has this certificate now that says that the King of Portugal was her father. So that's kind of crazy. She also claimed that there was present in the archives of Spain, which I don't know why it would be there, but that there was a document that was signed by Don Carlos stating that she was now legitimate, that he had put her into the line of succession with her brothers. That's also very unusual because it was against the Constitution at the time. And so, of course, that document doesn't survive. So we don't know if that ever survived or not, but she said she claimed it did. So like I said, the Civil War kind of really benefited her because she could say a lot of things and say, oh, well, it got destroyed in the war. So I don't have the original document, sorry. And so she's a very interesting character because, through her life, she was married twice. She had a child. She actually wrote several books. She wrote a couple of novels under the name of Ilda. Ilda de Toledano.
Mm-hmm.
And so she used that pen name. And then in 1957, she actually wrote an autobiography, the Memoires d'une enfant vivante. So, memoirs of a living princess. And, it's kind of crazy. She actually does in the 50s. This is when she starts claiming that not that this is when she first starts claiming it, but this is when she really starts forcefully using not only the title of Her Royal Highness, she starts claiming that she's the Duchess of Braganza, and then she actually at one point even starts claiming that she should be Queen of Portugal, because she would have been the heir to the throne after Manuel II died, then she would have come next, had she really been the daughter of Don Carlos. So, and then, during this time, as we know, Salazar was in power. And so there actually were a band of monarchists that kind of jumped on board with her and were kind of excited by the idea that she might be the rightful queen of Portugal, and maybe they could advance the monarchical agenda. Now, of course, Don Nuno, our current Duke of Braganza.
Yes, I was going to say there's Don Nuno, and
Yes.
God works in mysterious ways because we no longer have a kingdom, thank God.
Right.
With all due respect to Don Nuno.
Right. Now, he wasn't so happy about this.
I'm sure he wasn't.
He actually was a Salazar supporter. So he's on the other side, and he was claiming to be the Duke of Braganza, which, we talked about this before, but for people who don't know, Don Nuno is actually a descendant of Don Miguel I, who was a usurper, and there actually was in the Constitution of 1832 said that he was not allowed, that any descendant of Don Miguel was forever barred from the throne. So, a lot of people, even to this day, claim that he's illegitimate, that he should not be Duke of Braganza because of that. But of course, we have to remember that Portugal doesn't have a monarchy. But you better believe if I was a duchess, I'd be running around calling myself a duchess too. So I don't judge any of these people because I would do the same.
Well, and he was able to have a very royal wedding in a
True.
non-monarchical country and not a
Yes.
kingdom, and it was very criticized, obviously, by various political parties because Portugal, the state, and other private entities, it was
Right.
like he had a very, very kind of a take on Diana and Charles, but in 0.01, basically,
Right.
as we know, it wasn't the
Yeah.
same pomp and circumstances
No.
as Charles and Diana and all of the other princes instead.
Right. Yeah, well, he got snubbed by Queen Elizabeth, even though that's his third cousin. So that was not very nice. She didn't show up. Yeah, so here, Nuno is not happy. Of course, Salazar is not happy. She actually attended an event where he was at, and Salazar refused to even meet her, which is definitely 1 point for her. I don't like that, the other one was in support of Salazar. And so she kind of pitted herself as a constitutionalist versus, actually being a straight monarchist. And she went around saying that she was the Duchess of Braganza. At one point, I think it was in the 70s, she actually even stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks and didn't foot the bill and didn't pay her bill. And they said, well, you got to pay. And she says, well, I'm the Duchess of Braganza. I don't have to pay. That was it.
In a Republican form of government, I don't have to pay.
Exactly, I don't have to pay. I'm the Duchess. Okay.
Well, I'm sure the hotel manager said, yeah, but there's only one slight little problem: is we have a republic now. So
Right, exactly.
you have no power.
Right, the crown can't pay me, so somebody's got to.
That's true.
Yeah.
Fascinating
So she
character.
yeah, she was, and she really used this title as a way of leveraging her social status. So she went jet setting with the idle rich. She kind of reminds me of Edward of England, the one that abdicated the throne, Edward IV. Because he was a big playboy. When Daddy was still the king, he kind of ran around the world with Wallace Simpson, partying here and there. And that's kind of what this Media Pia did. Now, of course, Nuno, our current Duke of Braganza, quote unquote, he wanted to squash this question once and for all, whether or not she actually should be Duchess of Braganza, because he wanted to be, have claim to the title without any kind of obstacle. And so in 1966, he actually petitioned the ecclesiastical court, the Diocese of Madrid, to take the name of Don Carlos off of her baptismal certificate, and said that, that it wasn't legitimate, that, he wasn't really the father, that there wasn't any proof. And they actually denied his request, not because they believed Don Carlos was the father, but because they said he didn't have any right to do that. And they really thought it was kind of stupid. After 60 years, we're now gonna question the father on this baptismal certificate and change it. So he didn't get his way, and she got to keep, so she kind of used that as like, see, I told you he was my dad. Still not evidence, but but that was one win for her, definitely. And then so kind of things kind of settled down. Well, the 1980s, she decided that, as the princess of Portugal, Queen of Portugal, she's claiming to be, that all of the royal property should be returned to her because it was rightfully hers. So in 1982, she did file a petition with the Portuguese government to get restitution of all of the royal property, which they denied. They said there wasn't any proof that she was actually the heir, and that they were not going to give that up to her. So now the weird ending to the story is that she meets this guy named Rosario Poidemini, and he's Italian, 40 years younger than she is, well, maybe 35. and he was an Italian businessman. And for some reason, she adopted him as her son, and then abdicated the throne and said that he was going to be her heir. And then she produced a second document saying that he was a blood relation to her, because that was one thing with the succession. You had to be a blood relation. You can't adopt somebody that's not blood related to you and then let them inherit the throne. So she
Sure.
kind of did that to try to claim. So then now he calls himself His Royal Highness. Just yeah, so she gave up the rights to the throne and passed them on to this guy, but of course everyone ignores this. It's crazy. So she died in 1995, and we've never had any clear evidence of whether or not she really was the daughter of Don Carlos, or where she got this idea that she was the daughter of Don Carlos. I mean, probably if we really wanted to, maybe somebody could exhume her body and
Sure.
DNA test it
DNA testing,
to
yeah,
find out
yeah.
the truth. But I kind of like the mystery. It's sort of fun.
Well, it is, and interesting. 100 years later, they're still around, even though they were supposed to be gone in
Yeah,
1910.
yeah.
I think that is one of the things, and we're almost out of time, but I wanted to get your comment. I think it's one of the things that the Portuguese. I took a group of students my last year teaching at Tulare High School, so actually, I think the year before I left, so about 4 or 5 years ago, and we went to Spain and then to Portugal. And the Spaniards did an excellent job in promoting the mysticism. Of course, they are a monarchy now, but they promoted all of the stories of their various monarchs, and also of their discoveries. The little things that they did, and then we get to Portugal, and it's like, here we are. That's Henry the Navigator was there, and that there's the Torre de Belém where some of these guys left, and it's kind of not. We don't build up this mysticism, even if it's, a lot of it is indeed myth, but it's sometimes people need utopian dreams in order to have pride in something. So I felt in this 1 week that we were basically 3.5 days in Spain and 2.5 days in Portugal, the Spanish tour guides did a lot about this history tied to the monarchy, not of the current day, but of the old monarchy. And Portugal, it's kind of like, it happened. Well, but it happened for almost, for over 800 years, so
Yeah.
or just about. Yeah, we don't
No.
do that much of a good job, and we don't do as good of a job, or we didn't in that aspect. I felt that our history, and my students knew a little bit about it, obviously, and they felt that they weren't getting a lot from the Portuguese tour guides compared to what they got from the Spaniards.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think it's why we have such a shortage of historians of Portuguese history, not only in the United States, obviously in the United States, but even in Portugal. And I find that I don't, even when you talk to just your average person who even went to school in Portugal, they don't know that much about Portuguese history, and up until, there's just such a shortage, and I don't know what it is. If they just think like, oh, it's obvious we're great, so I don't even need to read about it. We don't have to promote ourselves. I think that's part of like our Portuguese, like the way we are as Portuguese people. We're not big about like, making a big deal about ourselves. So maybe that kind of carries on to, so if we don't make a big deal about ourselves, then we don't care as much about the history. I don't know what it is, but I agree with you 100%. I think that we definitely have, I feel like there's that attitude as well, where it's kind of like, it's just not as, like you go, like when I went to Lisbon, and I went to the Church of São Vicente de Fora, which is where the Luisa's buried. There was graffiti on the church. I was horrified. I was so upset, and it's just like, I don't know. Oh,
Well,
well.
it's I will end it with this. I had a college professor, one of my first political science professors. He said to me, he said, "Is it Borges or Borges?" Never forget this. And I said he knew the difference, which had impressed me because
Oh,
most
yeah.
people don't. And a Jewish gentleman, and I said Borges. He said, "So Portuguese?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "I'm surprised." And he says, "I do." He said, "The one thing is about you guys kind of discovered a lot of the world, but you didn't tell anybody about it." And I never forget. I will never forget. You did a lot of stuff, but you never told anybody about it. And I laughed at that, but that stuck with me all of these years. This is an old, now has passed political science professor.
Yeah, that is definitely true. That's like my advisor used to say, if something is done in Portuguese history, that means there's one book about it, and if it's overdone, that means there's two books about it. So.
Well, Monique, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you next week on the Portuguese-American Hour. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Bye.